This program is made possible by financial support from viewers like you.
Smart dust, ma'am. Billions of little smart dust cells.
You know the smart dust?
This is Babbling on in Babylon.
Welcome to the ride. Rolling through the ruins where the old kings fell. Talking giants, watching secret scripture tells. Shadows in the desert, prophecy in the wind. But Yeshua is the banner that we ride under again. Hey! Babylon and Babylon, spin that tail.
All right, let's just start here. If you've been online at all over the past little while, you've probably seen it. Videos, posts, screenshots, people standing outside at night, shining flashlights into a thick fog, saying something doesn't feel right. People talking about strange smells, irritation in their eyes or throat, residue on cars or windows. And then, inevitably, someone puts something under a microscope and says, "This isn't normal." And before you know it, words like smart dust, nanotech, government programs, DARPA, surveillance, and 5G start showing up in the same sentence. Now, before anyone freaks out and before anyone rolls their eyes, let me be clear about where I stand, because that matters for this conversation. I'm skeptical of conspiracy theories, being a recovering conspiracy theorist myself. But I'm also not naive about governments, and I absolutely do not believe that they would never do that is a serious argument, because history has already answered that question for us. There are real conspiracies. There are documented abuses. And the United States government, yes, our government, has been involved in them. MK Ultra wasn't a theory. It was real. And it wasn't admitted until it was already over. Well, so they say. Documents were destroyed, and people had been harmed. So when people say, the government would never, I stop listening right there. At the same time, just because governments lie doesn't mean every rumor is true. And just because something sounds scary doesn't mean it's happening. So what we're going to do in this episode is something rare these days. We're going to take the fear seriously, without surrendering our brains to it. And to do that, we need to talk about fog. Because fog is the perfect symbol for what's going on here. Fog limits visibility. Fog messes with your depth perception. Sounds carry strangely in fog. Distances feel off. Everything feels closer and farther away at the same time. If you've ever ridden a bike in fog, you know exactly what I mean. And humans are terrible at dealing with environments we can't see clearly. That's not a moral judgment. That's biology. For most of human history, the greatest dangers were the ones you couldn't see coming. Predators, enemies, disease, poison in the water, something in the air that made people sick. So when modern people walk outside and see thick fog behaving in ways they don't recognize, lingering longer than expected, smelling odd, irritating the body, it presses a very old button in the human brain. Something's wrong, something's hidden, something's being concealed. Now layer modern technology on top of that. Most of the technology that runs your life is invisible. You can't see radio waves. You can't see data packets. You can't see algorithms profiling you. You can't see your phone pinging towers. You can't see facial recognition software mapping bone structure. And you're just supposed to trust that it's all fine. So when people hear about smart dust, tiny sensors, microscopic technology, machines so small they could theoretically float in the air, the fear doesn't come out of nowhere. It clicks into a pre-existing anxiety. Because here's the thing no one likes to admit. We already live in a world where surveillance is mostly visible. No jackboots, no barbed wire, no obvious oppression. Just sensors, software, databases, and networks humming quietly in the background. And governments, not just ours, all of them, have proven over and over again that they are perfectly willing to overreach when given the opportunity, especially when they can do it quietly, and especially when they can justify it as for your safety. So when someone says, hey, what if the fog isn't just fog? They're not necessarily stupid. They're responding to a world that has already trained them not to trust appearances. That doesn't mean they're right, but it does mean the fear itself is worth understanding. Now, let's also be honest about something else. The internet has completely changed how rumors spread. 100 years ago, someone might notice something strange and tell a neighbor. Today, they tell the entire planet. Someone shines a flashlight into the fog, sees particles reflecting light, which fog droplets naturally do, records it, uploads it, and within hours, it's being analyzed by people who already distrust institutions and already believe something sinister is happening. And once that happens, confirmation bias kicks in hard. People start looking for evidence. And when you look long enough, you always find something that looks weird, especially under a microscope. Nature is full of bizarre, geometric, crystalline, alien-looking structures. Pollen, dust, fibers, microplastics, combustion particles, industrial pollution. Most people have never seen these things up close before. So when they do, their first thought isn't, oh, atmospheric chemistry. It's, that doesn't look natural. And to be fair, a lot of what we breathe isn't natural anymore. That's another uncomfortable truth. Air pollution is real. Chemical exposure is real. Environmental contamination is real. You don't need nanobots for that. So right here at the very beginning, we have to separate a few things. Fear of the invisible, distrust of government, real environmental issues, speculative technology, and outright science fiction. If we don't do that, everything collapses into one big, foggy mess, and nobody learns anything. So, in this episode, I'm not going to tell you, don't worry, trust the government. I don't believe that. But I'm also not going to tell you, yes, they're spraying smart dust over cities and activating it with 5G towers. Because that claim has problems too. Technical ones, logistical ones, and evidentiary ones. The truth, as usual, lives in the uncomfortable middle. And here's the question I want to leave hanging as we move into the next segment. What if the reason this ideal feels so believable isn't because of fog, or smart dust, or patents, or DARPA, but because we already know, deep down, that powerful institutions don't tell us the whole story. And if that's true, then how do we figure out what's actually happening without losing our grip on reality? That's where we're headed next. My name is Will, and I'm an aspirant follower of Yeshua HaMashiach. You might know him as Jesus Christ. And this is Babbling On in Babylon.
We're tuning in tonight, where the truth and the rumors collide in the light. From prophecy to mystery, we got it going on. Welcome to the sound of Babylon. Babbling on in Babylon. The stories keep rolling, the beat goes on. From shadows deep to the break of dawn, we keep babbling on. The page, ancient words on the mic. Conspiracies keep rolling, the beat goes on. From shadows deep to the break of dawn, we keep babbling on. Flip the page, ancient words on the mic. Conspiracies, prophecies, ride through the night. From heart to the heavens, the signs in the sky. Asking the questions they don't want you to try. Truth ain't clean, it's a puzzle and a fight. But we crack it wide open when the time is right. Whispers in the dark, voices in the dawn. Welcome to the chaos, Babylon strong. Babbling on in Babylon. The stories keep rolling, the beat goes on. From shadows deep to the break of dawn, we keep babbling on. Yeah, until the memories, timelines torn. Shadow people lurking since the day you were born. Signs of the end or a trick of the game. Either way, we're babbling and breaking the chains. Prophets smoke fire, the echo still call. But who's really listening behind the wall? So we watch and pray, keep the light turned strong. Babbling on in Babylon. Secrets, lies, and midnight songs. Truth is tangled, but we carry on. Mystery meets the rebel sound. Babylon's where the truth is found. Babbling on in Babylon. The stories keep rolling, the beat goes on. From shadows deep to the break of dawn, we keep babbling on. Flip the page, ancient words on the mic. Conspiracies, prophecies, ride through the night. From heart to the heavens, the signs in the sky. Asking the questions they don't want you to try. Truth ain't clean, it's a puzzle and a fight. But we crack it wide open when the time is right. Whispers in the dark, voices in the dawn. Welcome to the chaos, Babylon strong. Mad little memories, timelines torn. Shadow people lurking since the day you were born. Signs of the end or a trick of the game. Either way, we're babbling and breaking the chains. Prophets smoke fire, the echo still call. But who's really listening behind the wall? So we watch and pray, keep the light turned strong. Babbling on in Babylon. Babbling on in Babylon. The stories keep rolling, the beat goes on. From shadows deep to the break of dawn, we keep babbling on.
So let's talk about the phrase that keeps coming up over and over again in these conversations. Smart dust. Because as soon as that term gets dropped, people's imaginations go into overdrive. Tiny machines, invisible sensors, microscopic tech floating through the air, breathing it in, being tracked without knowing it. It sounds like science fiction. And that's exactly why it's so powerful. But here's the first thing we have to establish if we're going to take this seriously. Smart dust is not a myth. But the version people imagine usually is. The term smart dust originally referred to a very real area of research. Extremely small sensors, sometimes called molts, built using micro-electromechanical systems, MEMS for short. These are tiny devices that can, in theory, sense things like light, temperature, pressure, motion, maybe even chemical changes. Some versions can communicate wirelessly over very short distances. Others are passive, meaning they don't actively transmit at all unless energized by a nearby reader. And yes, these devices can be small, very small. Small enough that when people hear about them, their next thought is, wait, how small are we talking? And that's where things start to blur, because there's a massive difference between a lab prototype, a proof of concept, a specialized industrial application, a military research experiment, and a mass-deployed system affecting millions of people. Those are not the same thing. But the internet tends to flatten them into one scary ideal. Now, let's bring patents into the conversation, because this is where a lot of people feel like they've found their smoking gun. People will say, there are patents for this, airborne smart dust, biometric sensors, even inhalable particles. And they're not wrong. There are patents that describe extremely small sensors. There are patents that speculate about airborne deployment. There are patents that talk about biometric data collection. But here's the part that almost never gets explained clearly. A patent is not a confession. It's not proof of deployment. It's not even proof of feasibility at scale. A patent is a legal document that says, if someone ever builds something like this, we want to own the ideal. That's it. Companies and government contractors patent possibilities, not realities. They patent ideals that are technically speculative, economically unrealistic, logistically impractical, or decades away. Sometimes they patent things that never get built at all. You can find patents for asteroid mining tech that doesn't exist yet, medical devices that never left the drawing board, energy systems that violate basic economics, even outright nonsense. So when people say, there's a patent for smart dust in the air, the correct response isn't panic. It's, okay, but what would it take to actually do that? Because this is where the conversation has to move out of vibes and into physics. Let's say, just for the sake of argument, that someone wanted to deploy functional, intelligent sensor dust into the environment. They'd immediately run into a wall of problems. First, power. Electronics don't run on imagination. They need energy. Tiny sensors either need batteries, which limits lifespan and size, or need energy harvesting, light, vibration, RF, which limits where and how they work, or need to be passive, which limits what they can do. The smaller the device, the less power it has access to. And powering something wirelessly from a distance, especially inside the human body, is not easy. It requires proximity, alignment, and specific conditions. Second, communication. Even if a microscopic sensor could sense something, it has to get that data out. That means antennas, transmission protocols, receivers nearby, infrastructure. Tiny antennas mean short ranges. Short ranges mean dense networks of receivers, which means visibility. You don't just sprinkle dust and suddenly receive meaningful data from miles away. That's not how radio works. Third, durability. Electronics hate moisture, heat fluctuations, physical impact, corrosion, biological environments. Fog is wet. Lungs are wet. The environment is hostile to delicate electronics. A device small enough to float freely would have to survive conditions that destroy far larger machines. Fourth, manufacturing, and scale. To surveil a population, you'd need billions of devices, consistent quality, predictable behavior, massive logistics. That leaves trails, factories, contracts, supply chains, waste, failures. Those trails don't just stay invisible forever. So when people imagine smart dust as this all-seeing, all-knowing cloud of microscopic spies, they're skipping about 10 layers of very stubborn reality. That doesn't mean research isn't happening. It is. It doesn't mean experiments don't exist. They do. But it does mean that the leap from this can exist in a lab to this is being sprayed over cities is enormous. And that's where skepticism has to work both ways. Because here's the trap a lot of people fall into. I know I did. They distrust the government, which is reasonable. But then they trust random internet claims without applying the same skepticism. That's not discernment. That's just swapping authorities. Now, here's where I want to be very careful, because this matters. Just because this specific scenario doesn't add up cleanly, that does not mean governments aren't researching extreme things. They absolutely are. Military and intelligence agencies research edge cases, future capabilities, things that sound insane until suddenly they're not. Need I mention the elephant of AI in the room? They research what might be possible 10, 20, 30 years, and some of those ideals never see the daylight. Some get shelved. Some get reworked. Some just quietly disappear. And some eventually surface in forms nobody expected. That's why people keep circling back to patents and DARPA and black projects. Because they know, instinctively, that absence of public evidence is not the same as innocence. But here's the discipline part of this conversation. We can acknowledge that truth without filling in the blanks with whatever scares us the most. So let's summarize where we are before we move forward. Smart dust is a real research concept. Tiny sensors do exist. Miniaturization is advancing. You ever look at a microprocessor? Insane. Patents describe extreme possibilities. But patents are not proof of deployment. And current technology faces serious limitations when it comes to aerosolized, autonomous, long-term, population-scale surveillance via microscopic devices. Which leads us to a very uncomfortable realization. If this isn't how mass surveillance is happening, then why does it feel so real? Why does it feel so plausible? And why do so many people instinctively believe something like this could be true? That's not a technical question anymore. That's a historical one. And it takes us straight into the heart of government secrecy, classified research, and the long list of times we were told, nothing to see here, only to find out later there absolutely was. That's where we're going next. So stick around.
Well, you know what time it is. Every old country gathering had that moment. The basket made its way down the aisle. It's how the lights stayed on and the doors stayed open. These days, it looks a little different. If this video brought you any value, follow over on Rumble. Share it with someone who might need it. If you want to support directly, there's PayPal for a one-time gift, Ko-Fi for a few extras, and Patreon for the deeper content that doesn't always fit neatly here. And if all you can do is share it, that matters more than you think. Thank you. Truly. Alright, back to the show.
So at this point, we've done two important things. First, we acknowledge that some of the more extreme claims about smart dust and fog don't hold up well when you actually examine the physics and logistics. Second, we acknowledge something just as important. The government does not have a clean history when it comes to honesty, transparency, or respecting the autonomy of its citizens. And this is where a lot of conversations break down. Because the moment you criticize government secrecy, someone inevitably says, "Oh, so you're one of those people now," as if skepticism itself is the problem. But let's be clear about something right up front. Suspicion of power is not irrational. It's learned behavior. It's learned the same way you learn not to touch a hot stove, by getting burned. And when it comes to secrecy, experimentation, and abuse, governments, including the United States government, have given people plenty of reasons to be cautious. Let's talk about DARPA for a moment. DARPA's job is not to be comforting. DARPA's job is not to be transparent. DARPA's job is to imagine future battlefields and make sure the United States is prepared to dominate them. That includes developing technology that doesn't exist yet, exploring ethically uncomfortable ideals, funding research that sounds insane until it suddenly works. Quantum computing, anyone? DARPA is the place where ideals go before they're acceptable. And that alone doesn't make it evil. But it does mean that DARPA operates in a world where secrecy is not a flaw. It's a feature. Now add history. Because the reason MK Ultra keeps coming up in conversations like this isn't because people are stuck in the past. It's because MK Ultra shattered a very important illusion. The illusion that government would never intentionally harm its own citizens in the name of research or national security. That illusion died a long time ago. MK Ultra wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a single rogue scientist. It was a multi-year, multi-institutional program that involved human experimentation, psychological manipulation, drugging people without consent, and then destroying the records afterward. And the public didn't find out because the government volunteered the information. They found out because of leaks, investigations, and pressure after the damage was done. That pattern matters because once people realize they didn't tell us then, they destroyed evidence, they lied when asked, trust doesn't magically regenerate. And it shouldn't. That's why phrases like, "They never do that," ring hollow to so many people. History has already answered that claim, and the answer was, yes, they would, and they did. Now here's where we have to be careful again. Acknowledging past abuses does not mean assuming every rumor is true. There's a huge difference between the government has lied before and therefore this specific claim must be true. One is reasonable. The other is, well, lazy. And the danger isn't skepticism. It's pattern overreach. Because secrecy creates a vacuum, and vacuums get filled. Sometimes with legitimate investigative journalism, sometimes with speculation, sometimes with fear, and sometimes with outright fiction. When institutions refuse to communicate clearly, people start connecting dots on their own. And sometimes those dots were never meant to be connected. So when people hear about classified research, black budgets, compartmentalized programs, need-to-know structures, decades-long classification timelines, they assume, not unreasonably, that the public version of reality is incomplete. Because it usually is. What that doesn't mean is that every scary ideal floating around online is secretly true. But it does mean that dismissing concerns outright is intellectually dishonest. Here's the key tension of this entire episode. On one hand, governments absolutely conduct research the public never hears about until years later, sometimes decades. On the other hand, large-scale programs that affect millions of people leave footprints. They leave procurement trails, industrial partners, whistleblowers, environmental signatures, operational leaks. And the larger and more invasive the program, the harder it is to hide forever. I believe the good book says something about that which is in the dark will always be exposed to the light. That's the balance point. This is why smart dust theories feel both plausible and problematic. Plausible because we know secret research exists. Problematic because the logistics don't cleanly line up with the claims being made. So when someone says, if they were doing it, they wouldn't tell us, they're not wrong. But when someone says, and therefore anything unexplained must be them, that's where discernment needs to step in. Because fear doesn't require proof, but truth does. And here's another uncomfortable reality we have to talk about. If the government wanted mass surveillance, they wouldn't need smart dust. They already have better tools. I mean, every one of you out there listening to this is either watching on one of them, has one nearby, or one in your pocket. Which brings us to the part of this conversation that almost nobody wants to face. The reason smart dust is so terrifying is because it feels involuntary. It feels like something being done to you. But the most effective surveillance systems don't rely on force. They rely on convenience. They rely on consent that doesn't feel like consent. They rely on devices people love, carry, and upgrade willingly. And that realization reframes everything. Because if you're worried about being watched, you might be looking in the wrong direction. And that's where all this finally comes together. Not fog, not dust, not patents, not classified programs, but a system that's already in place. Visible if you know where to look, invisible if you don't. And that's where we're headed next.
Yeah, the world's louder now. But truth don't shout. It whispers, let's ride. They say pick a side. I say man, I ain't blind. I seen prophets fall for power while the poor get left behind. Holy land's on fire, headlines full of blame, but faith don't fly a flag, it just calls out his name. I'm tired of the labels, tired of the fights. Everybody's claiming darkness, nobody's bringing light. Truth's a whisper in a hurricane spin. If you ain't grounded in the word, you'll get pulled right in. Though I sit in darkness, the Lord will be my light. He's the calm in the chaos, He's the day in my night. The world's gone crazy, but my soul's still right. 'Cause the Lord, yeah, the Lord, He's my light. Protests in the streets, ice in the door. Everybody screaming justice, but nobody's sure what truth even looks like when the lens gets twisted. Clickbait, profits, algorithms enlisted. They're selling outrage, fear and pride, but I ain't buying, I'm just trying to ride. Zion, Babylon, hashtags and guns. We forgot the kingdom when the screen said run. Ain't no savior in a headline, no salvation in a fight. Just the blood of the Lamb and the will to do right. Though I sit in darkness, the Lord will be my light. He's the truth that can't cancel, He's the fire that ignites. The world's gone crazy, but my soul's still right. 'Cause the Lord, yeah, the Lord, He's my light. They shot a man on stage and the world lost its breath. Now rumors bloom like weeds in the wake of his death. But I ain't pointing fingers, I'm folding my hands, praying for the truth, only heaven understands. This ain't flesh and blood, it's a spiritual fight. So I armor up daily in the power of His might. No matter what they twist, no matter what they write, I still believe the word cuts deeper than the bite. Though I sit in darkness, the Lord will be my light. He's the truth they can't cancel, He's the fire that ignites. The world's gone crazy, but my soul's still right. 'Cause the Lord, yeah, the Lord, He's my light. Truth don't shout, brothers and sisters, just stand still and shines. Keep the faith, keep watching, and keep riding toward the kingdom. Shalom.
So let's take a breath for a second and zoom out. Because after all this talk about fog, smart dust, patents, DARPA, secrecy, and conspiracies, we're left with a strange realization. If the goal were mass surveillance, if the goal were behavioral monitoring, if the goal were tracking people, predicting them, influencing them, why on earth would anyone need smart dust? Why invent a microscopic, fragile, expensive, technically complex system when something far simpler already exists? And this is where the conversation gets uncomfortable. Because the truth is, the most powerful surveillance system ever created doesn't float through the air. It sits in your pocket. It's mounted on buildings. It's embedded in infrastructure. It's normalized. It's convenient. It's marked as helpful. Your phone knows where you are. Your phone knows where you've been. Your phone knows who you've talked to, when and for how long. It knows what you search, what you watch, what you buy, how fast you move, where you stop. It doesn't need to read your thoughts. It can predict them. And it does this not because the government forced it on you, but because you agreed to it. Because surveillance works best when it doesn't feel like surveillance. Now layer in cameras, not hidden ones, open ones, normalized ones, traffic cameras, security cameras, doorbell cameras, store cameras, public cameras. Add facial recognition software that doesn't get tired, doesn't blink, and doesn't forget. Add location data brokers. Add app permissions no one reads. Add smart devices listening for wake words. Add AI systems trained to recognize patterns in behavior. Suddenly, the world itself becomes a sensor. And here's the part that makes smart dust theories feel almost, well, unnecessary. This system doesn't require secrecy. It operates in the open. It's legal, it's profitable, it's scalable, and it's voluntary. at least on paper, which leads to a deeply ironic truth. The reason people fear smart dust so intensely is because it represents forced surveillance, something being done to them. But the real surveillance system thrives on participation, on convenience, on habit, on distraction. No fog required. So when people fixate on microscopic particles in the air, part of what they're really expressing is something deeper. A sense that control has become invisible. A sense that power no longer announces itself. A sense that the rules are changing without consent. And that feeling is not imaginary. We really are living through a shift away from overt authority towards algorithmic authority, away from human judgment towards automated decision-making, away from privacy as a default towards privacy as an exception. And here's where the conversation turns philosophical and maybe even spiritual. Because historically, freedom wasn't lost all at once. It was eroded, piece by piece, feature by feature, update by update, always with good intentions, always for safety, always for efficiency, and rarely with an exit ramp. That's why it's important to say this clearly. You don't need to believe that smart dust is being sprayed over cities to recognize that surveillance has become ambient. You don't need to accept every conspiracy to admit that governments and corporations benefit from opacity. You don't need to panic to stay alert. And you don't need to trust authority blindly to avoid losing your grip on reality. The danger isn't fog in the air. It's fog in our thinking. It's the inability to separate what is possible from what is probable, from what is proven. It's the temptation to replace careful skepticism with fear, or worse, with apathy. Because here's the real risk. If people obsess over imaginary threats, they miss the real ones. And if people dismiss every concern as paranoia, they leave power completely unaccountable. Neither extreme leads to wisdom. So where does that leave us? Somewhere uncomfortable. Somewhere unresolved. Somewhere honest. We live in a world where governments have lied, research has crossed ethical lines, surveillance has expanded quietly, and technology has outpaced public understanding. That doesn't mean everything you hear is true, but it does mean discernment matters more than ever. And discernment isn't about fear. It's about clarity. It's about asking better questions. It's about refusing easy answers, whether they come from official press releases or viral videos. So the next time you hear about strange fog, or smart dust, or secret programs, don't panic. But don't dismiss it either. Ask, what's being claimed? What's actually known? What would it take for this to be real? Who benefits from fear? Who benefits from silence? Because wisdom doesn't live at the extremes. It lives in the space between trust and suspicion. In an age where everything is monitored, recorded, analyzed, and archived, that kind of wisdom might be the most subversive thing left. Well, thank you for joining me here this evening, or today, or this morning, or whenever it is you're listening to this here podcast. I know your time is valuable, and I surely do appreciate you spending a little bit here with this old man as he babbles on in Babylon. Hope to see you all here next time. And until next time, I'll be willing. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, friends. In a world that seems to spin faster every day, where truth feels fragile, and anger fills the spaces where love used to live, remember this: God's light still breaks through the noise. It shines through every honest word, every act of mercy, every moment we choose prayer instead of pride. Nations will argue, kings will fall, but his kingdom, the one written not on paper, but on our hearts, stands forever. So keep your eyes on that light, keep your heart soft even when the world grows cold, and when the night feels long, just whisper, though I sit in darkness, the Lord will be my light. Until next time, keep the faith, keep watching, and keep riding toward the kingdom. Shalom.